Jessamy didn't know the man watching her from across the great hall was the enemy king her people had taught her to fear. She didn't know he'd traveled 7 days through hostile territory just to witness this moment. And she definitely didn't know that the rejection about to shatter her world would be the very thing that saved her life. All she knew was that her hands wouldn't stop trembling. The Great Conclave happened once every decade, when the 5 Alpha Kingdoms gathered under sacred truce to forge alliances, settle disputes, and witness unions that would shape the realm for generations. The hall of Valdris Castle had been transformed for the occasion, its stone walls draped in crimson silk, its iron chandeliers blazing with 1,000 candles. Dignitaries from every kingdom filled the gallery, their eyes fixed on the raised dais where Jessamy stood beside Alpha Aldrich, the man she'd been promised to since birth. She was wearing her mother's wedding gown, ivory silk embroidered with silver thread. The seamstress had worked through the night to adjust it, pinching and tucking until it fit Jessamy's smaller frame. It still didn't feel right. Nothing about today felt right. Aldrich stood 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell the wine on his breath, far enough that they might as well have been strangers. His jaw was set like granite, his pale eyes fixed on some point above the crowd. He hadn't looked at her once since she'd entered the hall. 22 years she'd spent preparing for this moment, learning to walk like a Luna, speak like a Luna, and suppress every emotion that might make her seem weak. And now, standing before 500 witnesses in her dead mother's dress, all Jessamy could think was that Aldrich's hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "Oh, lords and ladies of the conclave," Elder Osric's voice rang out, ancient and commanding. "We gather to witness the union of Alpha Aldrich of Valdris and Lady Jessamy of the Western Province, a joining that will strengthen our borders and secure our bloodlines for generations to come." The crowd murmured approval. Jessamy's father, standing in the front row, beamed with pride. Elder Osric raised the bonding cord. "Alpha Aldrich, do you accept this woman as your bonded mate? Your Luna, your partner in all things?" Silence. The word should have come immediately, a simple yes spoken with conviction. Jessamy had rehearsed it 100 times, but Aldrich said nothing. The silence stretched, pulling taut like a bowstring. Jessamy's pulse hammered against her ribs. She turned to look at him, and for the first time all morning, his eyes met hers. They were cold, empty. The eyes of a man about to do something he couldn't take back. "No," Aldrich said. The word cracked through the hall like thunder. "I reject this union." His voice carried to every corner, strong and certain. "Lady Jessamy is unfit to be my Luna. Her bloodline is diluted, her wolf is weak, and she brings nothing of value to Valdris." Jessamy couldn't breathe. The air had turned to glass in her lungs, sharp and impossible to draw. Gasps rippled through the crowd, her father's face drained of color. Elder Osric stood frozen, the bonding cord hanging limp in his gnarled hands. "She is a burden I never asked for," Aldrich continued, his voice rising, "shackled to me by my father's foolish promises. I will not honor a contract made by a dead man. Let it be known before all 5 kingdoms. I reject Jessamy of the Western Province as my mate. She is nothing to me. She is nothing to anyone." The words hit like physical blows. Jessamy felt her knees buckle, caught herself on nothing but pure, stubborn will. She would not fall. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of the wolves who just watched her be declared worthless. Her father was shouting something, pushing through the crowd. Guards moved to intercept him. The hall erupted into chaos. Jessamy stood alone on the dais, drowning in her mother's dress, invisible in plain sight. Then a voice cut through the noise. "I'll take her." The words were quiet, but they carried. Something in their timbre commanded attention, demanded silence. The chaos stuttered, stumbled, stopped. Jessamy turned toward the voice and felt her heart seize. He stood at the edge of the gallery, separated from the Valdris nobles by a deliberate gap that spoke of old enmity. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on ancient coins, all sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could have been carved from mountain stone. He wore black leather and silver, no crown, but he didn't need one. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. Alpha King Chaol of Thornhaven, the Wolf of the East. Enemy of Valdris for 3 generations. He stepped forward, and the crowd parted before him like water. Under the laws of the Conclave, Kyle said, his dark gray eyes never leaving Jessamy's face, a rejected mate may be claimed by another alpha before witnesses. I invoke that right. Aldrich's face twisted with fury. You have no standing here, Thornhaven. You just announced to 5 kingdoms that she's nothing to you, which means she's available to anyone with eyes to see what you're too blind to notice. He stopped before Jessamy, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Lady Jessamy. His voice dropped, meant for her alone, though hundreds strained to hear. You don't know me. You have no reason to trust me, but I'm offering you a choice. Stay here as a disgraced woman, or come with me as an honored guest. Choose. Her mind reeled. Chaol of Thornhaven was her people's enemy. Going with him would be seen as betrayal, as surrender, as the only door left open. Jessamy looked at Aldrich, at the contempt curling his lip, at her father, restrained by guards, at the sea of faces that had watched her humiliation and done nothing. Then she looked at Chaol, at the hand he extended toward her. Why? She whispered. Why would you want me? Something flickered in those gray depths, something that looked almost like recognition. Because I know what you are, Jessamy. His voice was barely audible, even if you don't. No one knew. No one could know. She'd spent her entire life hiding it, suppressing it, pretending it didn't exist. The gift that had gotten her mother killed. But Chaol was looking at her like he could see straight through to her bones, like he'd known her secret before he'd ever set foot in this hall. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. The silence that followed Chaol's words pressed against Jessamy's chest like a physical weight. He knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew. Her gift had awakened when she was 7 years old, the same age her mother's had manifested. The ability to sense truth from lies, to feel the shape of deception in another person's words like oil on water. Her mother had called it the sight. The church had called it witchcraft. They'd burned her mother at the stake when Jessamy was 9, and her father had made her swear to never speak of the gift again. 13 years of silence. And now this stranger, this enemy king, was looking at her like he could read every secret she'd ever buried. Your answer, Lady Jessamy. Chaol's hand remained extended. The Conclave's protection only lasts until sunset. After that, Aldrich can detain you as a political hostage. Her gaze snapped to Aldrich. His face had gone carefully blank, but she caught the calculation behind his eyes. And something else. Fear. That familiar tingling sensation spread across her scalp, her gift awakening unbidden. She goes nowhere with Thornhaven filth, Aldrich growled. Lie. The word resonated through Jessamy's bones. He didn't care if she left. He wanted her to leave. The entire rejection had been designed to make her disappear. But why? I'll go with you. The words left her mouth before she'd fully decided to speak them. But as soon as they hung in the air, she knew they were right. Chaol's fingers closed around hers. Then let's not overstay our welcome. They swept through the great doors before Aldrich could respond. The corridor beyond was chaos. Jessamy's borrowed slippers caught on her skirt, and Chaol's arm tightened, steadying her without breaking stride. Brennan, he said to the scarred warrior at his left, horses ready? Saddled and waiting, my king. They burst into the courtyard where horses stamped and snorted. Jessamy gathered her skirts and mounted without assistance, swinging into the saddle with grace born of years spent escaping her father's manor. Kale mounted beside her, his eyes sweeping the castle walls where archers were already appearing. "Ride," he commanded. They thundered through the gates and into the countryside. 3 hours later, they crossed into Thornhaven territory. The landscape shifted as they rode, flat farmland giving way to ancient forests and mist-shrouded valleys. Kale finally called a halt at a stream deep in the woods. He came to stand beside her horse, offering his hand. "You ride well." "I've had practice running away." She took his hand and slid down. Up close, in daylight filtering through the canopy, she could see exhaustion carved into his features. "We should talk," Jessamy said. "About what you said. About knowing what I am." "Not here. Not yet." He glanced at his warriors. "What I have to tell you isn't for everyone's ears. But you do have something to tell me." "Yes." His honesty resonated through her senses like a clear bell. No deception. "Then I'll wait. But not forever." They reached Ironfall Keep at dawn the next day. The castle rose from a mountain's shoulder like it had grown there, black stone and sharp towers wrapped in perpetual mist. It was brutal. A fortress built to withstand centuries. But as they passed through the gates, Jessamy noticed something unexpected. Children playing, women laughing, warriors training with easy camaraderie. The people of Ironfall Keep weren't afraid. A woman named Marin showed her to chambers larger than her entire suite back in Valdris. A copper tub steamed with rose-scented water. Clean clothes lay across the bed. Not a gown, but practical riding leathers. "His Majesty thought you might prefer practicality," Marin said. "He said you seem like someone who values movement over appearance." After Marin left, Jessamy sank into the bath and let it unknot her muscles. She thought about Kale, the way he'd touched her elbow so carefully when she'd swayed. The way he'd promised her a choice when he could have simply taken. She slept 14 hours straight. Sunlight was streaming through the windows when a knock woke her. "Lady Jessamy, the king requests your presence in the war room." Kale stood at the far end of a circular chamber dominated by an oak table carved with a detailed map of the realm. When he faced her, she saw that he looked different, rested, but somehow wearier. "You have questions," he said. "Hundreds." "Ask." She approached the table, using it as a barrier. "How did you know about my gift?" Something vulnerable flickered across his face before he controlled it. "Because my mother had the same ability. Truth sensing. She could tell lies from honesty the way other people distinguish colors." "Had?" "She was murdered. 12 years ago. Someone in my father's court poisoned her. Made it look like illness. My father was devastated. Withdrew from ruling. 6 months later, he was assassinated too. I'm sorry. I was 18. Suddenly a king, with enemies I couldn't identify." His eyes met hers. "I've spent 12 years trying to find my mother's killer. I've interrogated dozens of suspects. Nothing has worked." "Because you can't tell when they're lying." "Exactly." He straightened. "But you can." The implication settled over Jessamy like a cloak. "You claim me because you want to use my gift to find your mother's killer." "Partly, but there's more. Your bloodline, Jessamy. Do you know where your mother's family came from?" She never spoke of it. "Your mother was Princess Celestine of Ravenmoor. Her twin sister Rosalind also survived the massacre that destroyed their kingdom 40 years ago. They fled separately, your mother west, her sister east." Jessamy's knees threatened to buckle. Ravenmoor, the lost kingdom, its entire royal family supposedly slaughtered, its people scattered. "If I'm Ravenmoor, you become one of the most valuable people in the realm, the heir to a fallen kingdom, a woman who can sense lies, and a target for everyone who benefited from Ravenmoor's destruction." Aldrich. The realization crashed over her. His grandfather led the army that destroyed Ravenmoor. That's why he rejected me. He was afraid of what I am. If your heritage became public, it would expose his family's crimes. He needed you gone, but he couldn't kill you without raising suspicion. So he humiliated you instead. Jessamy's hands were shaking. Her entire life had been a lie. Why tell me this? Why not just use my gift and keep me ignorant? Cale was silent for a long moment. Because I've spent 12 years lying and manipulating to survive, and I'm tired. You deserve to know exactly what you're walking into. I need your help. But I want you to give it freely. Her senses assessed his sincerity. It came back clean and clear. What exactly are you asking? Stay here. Use your ability to help me identify the traitor in my court. In exchange, I'll protect your identity, provide you safety. And when we find my mother's killer, you're free to go wherever you want. How long? Weeks, maybe months. Jessamy thought about Valdris, where she'd never been anything but a bargaining chip. About her father, who'd hidden everything and let her walk into a rejection he must have known was coming. I'll need conditions. I'm not a prisoner. I go where I want, speak to whom I choose, and leave if this arrangement isn't working. Agreed. I won't be paraded as your conquest. I wouldn't expect you to. And if I discover something you don't want to hear, if the truth isn't what you expected, you don't punish me for it. His jaw tightened. Agreed. Even if the truth destroys me. Then I'll stay. Relief flooded his features. The days that followed established a rhythm. Mornings, Jessamy reviewed lists of court members with Cale. Afternoons, she observed court functions, letting her gift sift through constant streams of words. Most people lied constantly, small untruths that lubricated social interaction, but some lies were larger, darker. Lord Vance, the master of coin, consistently lied about treasury contents. The captain of the Eastern Guard had been approached by Valdris spies and hadn't reported it. Each revelation, Cale handled quietly. Lord Vance was reassigned to a remote border post. The captain disappeared and was never mentioned again. You're not just looking for your mother's killer, Jessamy observed one evening. You're cleaning your entire court. Is that a problem? No. It's just more than you told me. His voice was carefully neutral. The one who killed my mother is simply the worst of them. She caught something beneath it. Exhaustion, loneliness. When's the last time you had a conversation that wasn't political? She asked. Cale blinked. I don't remember. That's incredibly sad. It's necessary. It's both. She tilted her head. What do you do for enjoyment? I rule a kingdom. That's work, not enjoyment. He studied her. This king forged by tragedy into something harder than iron. Perhaps you're right, he admitted. The air between them shifted. Jessamy became suddenly aware of how late it was, how they'd been alone together for hours without either noticing. I should go, she said, standing. Cale rose and crossed to open the door, but he paused with his hand on the handle. Jessamy, thank you. For staying. For treating me like a person instead of a king. You are a person. Sometimes I forget. She reached out, touching his arm briefly. Then I'll remind you. His eyes dropped to where her fingers rested against his sleeve. When they lifted again, they held something new. Something dangerous. Jessamy pulled her hand back and slipped through the door, but she felt his gaze follow her all the way down the corridor. Over the following weeks, something changed. The professional distance eroded, replaced by something warmer. Cale started joining her for meals. He showed her his mother's garden. He told her about his childhood, before the murders. And Jessamy found herself sharing in return. Her memories of her mother. Her lonely years hiding. The constant fear that someone would discover her gift and burn her. Cale listened to everything. He never pitied, never patronized, just listened with focused intensity that made her feel truly seen. You're dangerous, she told him one night, as they walked the battlements under stars. What makes you say so? You make me forget to be careful? Something shifted in his expression. Is that bad? I don't know yet. They stopped at the wall's edge, looking out over the mist-shrouded valley. Jessamy. Kale turned to face her. I need to tell you something. Her pulse quickened, anticipation building in her chest. I brought you here for your ability. That was true. But it's not why I asked you to stay. He stepped closer. I've watched you for weeks. The way you move through the court, unafraid. The way you've challenged me. I've never met anyone like you. Kale. I know it's complicated. You're supposed to be here as an investigator. But I can't stop thinking about you. And I think you feel it too. Every instinct told her to step back, but she reached up and traced the line of his jaw instead. I feel it, she admitted. His breath caught. One hand rose slowly, fingers threading through her hair at the nape of her neck. Tell me to stop. If you don't want this, tell me now. Jessamy rose on her toes and answered by pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first. Then Kale made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, and the gentleness ignited into something fiercer. His arms wrapped around her like he was afraid she might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Kyle pressed his forehead to hers. I'm not letting you go, he said, rough with promise. When this is over, when we found the truth, I'm not letting you go. You promised I could leave. I know, and I'll keep that promise, but I'm also going to spend every moment until then convincing you to stay. Jessamy laughed despite herself. Noted. They stood wrapped together as the moon rose higher, and for the first time since the conclave, Jessamy felt something she'd forgotten was possible. Hope. The next morning, everything shattered. Jessamy was dressing when Marin burst through the door, her face pale with terror. Lady Jessamy, you need to hide. Now. What? Why? Lord Vance. He's not at the border post. He's here with soldiers, claiming you've bewitched the king. They're calling for your execution. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. Jessamy's pulse spiked. Where's Kale? Confronting them in the Great Hall, but Vance brought 50 men, Valdris soldiers. He's claiming you've used dark magic to manipulate the king, that your bloodline is cursed. He knows I'm Ravenmoor. The pieces clicked into place. Vance is connected to Aldrich. He might even be connected to the Queen's murder. The Great Hall was chaos. Lord Vance stood at the center, flanked by armored soldiers in Valdris crimson. Kale stood alone before his throne, unarmed, facing the contingent with cold fury. You've been seduced by a witch, Vance was saying. The Ravenmoor bloodline carries corruption. She's clouded your judgment. Half the council agrees. She must burn, and you must submit to evaluation by the temple. The council doesn't have authority to demand evaluation of a sitting king, Kale said, his voice dangerously quiet. It does, when the king has been compromised. Jessamy pushed through the doors. Every head turned. Gasps rippled through the crowd at the sight of her walking calmly into the standoff. Lady Jessamy, Vance's smile widened. How kind of you to save us the trouble. You're lying, Jessamy said, and her voice carried clearly. Everything you've said in this hall has been a lie, and I can prove it. Silence. Kale's eyes found hers across the room. She saw fear there, the desperate urge to protect her. But she also saw trust. The Ravenmoor bloodline isn't cursed, Jessamy continued. It's gifted. We sense lies. Every falsehood that leaves your lips registers in my mind like a wrong note. Murmurs erupted. Vance's smile flickered. Convenient claim. Impossible to verify. Not impossible. Jessamy turned to the assembled nobles. Lady Margot, is your husband faithful? The woman went pale. What does that have to do with? Answer honestly. Lady Margot's face crumpled. No, he's been seeing the kitchen maid for months. Truth. I sense no deception. She turned to another noble. Lord Carrick, did you really lose those supply wagons to bandits last winter? Lord Carrick's jaw dropped. How dare you? That's a lie already. This is absurd, Vance interrupted, but his voice had lost confidence. Then let me ask you something, Lord Vance. Jessamy's eyes locked onto his. Were you present the night Queen Isadora was poisoned? The question landed like a blade. Kyle went rigid. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Vance's face contorted through shock, fear, fury. The Queen died of illness. Everyone knows that. Lie. You know she was poisoned because you helped do it. This is slander. You've lied 4 times since I entered this hall. About council authority, about the Ravenmore bloodline, about not being able to verify my gift, and about the Queen's death. Vance's hand moved to his sword. Kale moved faster. One moment he stood before the throne, the next his blade pressed to Vance's throat. I've waited 12 years for this, Kale said, his voice cold as winter graves. 12 years of wondering who murdered my mother. And you stood beside me the whole time, counseled me, pretended to grieve with me. You can't prove anything. Her word against mine. Her word is truth. Yours has always been poison. Kyle glanced at his guards. Seize the Valdris soldiers. Any who resist, kill. The hall erupted into motion. Steel clashed. Vance tried to flee, but Kale threw him to the ground. You'll stand trial, and you'll confess everything. I'll tell you nothing. Kale smiled, and it was terrifying. You won't have to. My mate will sit beside me at your trial. Every lie you tell she'll identify. Vance's face went gray with terror. The battle was brief. Within minutes, the Valdris soldiers had surrendered or fallen. Kale surveyed the damage, then turned to Jessamy. The cold mask fell away. Are you all right? He crossed to her in 3 strides, one hand gripping her shoulder, the other tilting her chin up. Did they hurt you? I'm fine, Kale. You walked into an armed standoff. I had to. You needed me. His iron control wavered, emotion flooding his features. I'll always need you. The trial lasted 3 days, with Jessamy calling out every deception the moment it left his lips. Vance's defenses crumbled. The truth was worse than anyone had imagined. Vance had been working for Valdris since before Kale was born, feeding information, sabotaging alliances. He'd helped orchestrate the Ravenmore War 40 years ago. When Queen Isadora began using her gift to identify traitors, he'd arranged her poisoning. And when King Hadrian fell into grief, Vance had guided the assassin to his chambers. Aldrich's grandfather promised me lands when Valdris absorbed Thornhaven, Vance confessed on the final day. When I discovered the Ravenmore girl was still alive, I saw an opportunity. Deliver her to Aldrich, let him use her to consolidate power, and Thornhaven would fall within a decade. But I claimed her first, Kale said. You ruined everything. Vance's eyes burned with hatred. You were supposed to be distracted. Instead, you found the one person who could unravel 40 years of work. I found my mate. Kale's hand covered Jessamy's. That's what you never understood. Vance was executed at dawn. Jessamy didn't attend. Instead, she stood in Queen Isadora's garden, watching the sunrise. Kale found her there an hour later. It's over, he said, coming to stand beside her. Is it? The conspiracy, yes. Aldrich will answer for his family's crimes eventually, but he's not foolish enough to move against us now. Kale turned to face her. The rest is just beginning. I love you, she said. Kale went still. Say that again. I love you. I think I started falling that first night at the conclave, when you looked at me like I was worth something. He kissed her with a desperation that stole her breath. When they broke apart, his eyes were bright with joy. Marry me, he said. That was fast. I've waited 12 years to find someone I could trust. I'm done waiting. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Marry me, Jessamy. Be my queen. The old Jessamy would have hesitated, would have searched for the trap, the hidden cost. But she wasn't the old Jessamy anymore. Yes. The wedding was held under a full moon in Queen Isadora's garden that Jessamy had spent weeks restoring. Jessamy wore silver, Kale wore black. The vows they spoke were unconventional. I promise to tell you the truth, Kale said, even when it's difficult. I promise to trust you with my fears as well as my hopes, and I promise that no matter what challenges we face, you will never face them alone. I promise to see you, Jessamy replied, not just the king, but the man beneath the crown. I promise to stand beside you in darkness and in light. When they kissed to seal the bond, magic flared between them, the mate bond her mother had whispered about, finally complete. Not a chain, but a bridge, connecting them while leaving each whole. The celebration lasted until dawn. Finally, they slipped away to their chambers. Kale loved her slowly that night, reverently, his hands mapping her body like she was a territory he intended to worship for the rest of his life. She loved him back, with equal intensity. Afterward, tangled together in moonlight, Kale traced patterns on her shoulder. Tell me something you've never told anyone. Jessamy considered. When I was little, before my mother died, I used to dream about being a queen. Not for the power, but because I thought queens got to make the rules, got to decide that being different wasn't wrong. And now you are a queen? Now I am. She smiled against his chest. My mother used to say the truth always finds its way to the surface, Kale murmured. I think she meant us. We were always going to find each other. That's very romantic for a battle-hardened Alpha King. You've ruined me completely. Good. 6 months later, Jessamy stood at the window of their chambers, watching riders approach through the valley. Kale joined her, his hand finding hers. Ready? As I'll ever be. The riders were from Valdris, Aldrich himself coming to negotiate peace now that his kingdom's crimes had been exposed. Are you sure you're up for it? Kale's palm pressed gently against her stomach. The healers said I'm perfectly healthy. She turned in his arms. I'm pregnant, not dying. You're carrying our child. Excuse me for being cautious. You're excused, but I'm still attending the negotiations. Our baby is going to be born into a world at peace, and I intend to make sure of it. Kale's expression softened. Have I mentioned lately that you're extraordinary? Once or twice, but I don't mind hearing it again. Extraordinary, brilliant, beautiful, brave, mine. Yours, she agreed, always. They walked down together, king and queen, partners in truth and in love. And as Jessamy took her seat beside the throne, she thought about that terrified girl in the ruined wedding dress, standing alone on the dais while her world crumbled. That girl had been claimed by an enemy king, had learned she was heir to a lost kingdom, had helped bring down a conspiracy decades in the making, had found love where she'd expected only survival. He'd rejected her before the entire court, called her worthless. Nothing. And a better man had looked across that hall and seen something entirely different. She'd gained a kingdom, a family, a love that defied everything she'd been taught to expect. It had all started with one word. No, Aldrich had said. Thank you, Jessamy thought now, watching his delegation approach. Thank you for letting me go, because being let go had allowed her to be found by a better man, a better kingdom, a better life, and she would never, ever look back. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.